I've baked over 10,000 loaves of sourdough at home and in my bakery, and these are the lessons I wish someone had told me when I was starting out. Because here's the truth: if your bread keeps turning out flat and gummy, or if you've tried sourdough and felt like this just isn't working for me, you're not alone. Sourdough seems complicated because so much of the advice out there is complicated, but it doesn't have to be.
If your starter sucks, so will your bread. It sounds harsh, I know, but I want you to make good bread and not waste your time and ingredients. Your bread will only ever be as good as your starter. If your starter is sluggish, neglected, or smells like nail polish remover, your bread's gonna show it. It won't rise properly, the flavor will be way too sour and not in a good way. Your starter is the thing that makes your dough rise, and your bread actually tastes like sourdough. Take good care of it and it will help you make amazing bread. A healthy starter should double in size 4 to 6 hours after feeding. It should be fed regularly, not neglected in the back of your fridge for weeks. It should smell kind of like yogurt, not overly acidic. And it should be bubbly and light and airy and alive. Pro tip: I like to keep my starter thicker by feeding it a little more flour than water. I'm going for the consistency of a thick pancake batter. My starter thrives with this thicker consistency. Bulk fermentation is the make or break moment. This is the step most new and even experienced bakers get wrong. If you don't nail bulk fermentation, you will not end up with good bread, no matter how great your starter is or how well you follow every other step of the process. Most people under ferment their dough, but the best loaves live right on the edge of over fermented. Under fermented bread is dense, gummy, and flat. Over fermented bread may still be flat, but it won't be dense and gummy, and it will still taste good, especially if you toast it and add a little extra butter, because let's face it, butter makes everything taste better. When is bulk fermentation done? Here are the signs you should look for: bubbles on the surface and sides, a domed top like a muffin that slightly pulls away from the container. The entire mass of dough should move when you shake that bowl. It should feel light and airy like a giant marshmallow, and the dough pulls away from the sides of the bowl without sticking. I prefer for my dough to double in size, and for new bakers, that's a good general rule to follow. As you get more experience with your sourdough baking, you'll be able to determine how much rise you like your dough to have based on the dough temperature. But for now, look for it to double in size. Pro tip: when you think bulk ferment is done, wait another 30 to 45 minutes. Lesson number 3, use high protein bread flour, especially if you're new. Many struggling bakers are using all-purpose flour or adding in grains like einkorn, spelt, or whole wheat before they're ready. Those flours absorb water differently and behave differently, often requiring adjustments to the amount of water in a recipe, which is too complex for beginners. Start with 100% high protein bread flour so you can learn how the dough should look, feel, and bake. Once you're consistently making good bread, then you can experiment with whole grains. Save yourself the headache. Master the basics first. Whole grains are not for beginners. The recipe you use matters. Not all sourdough recipes are beginner friendly. The key thing to look at: hydration. How much water is in the dough compared to the flour? Too little water, you're gonna have a dense, tight crumb. Too much water, and you're gonna have sticky dough that's impossible to handle. Look for a recipe with 65 to 70% hydration if you're a beginner baker. Mine is linked below, and it's made specifically for beginners. Avoid high hydration recipes until you're more experienced. You don't need to fight with super sticky and difficult dough just to feel like you're doing it right. Lesson number 5, temperature affects everything. You don't have to become a scientist, but get a $15 digital thermometer and take the temperature of your dough after the final round of stretch and folds. This is called the final dough temp, and it's a real game changer. Here's the rule: warmer dough ferments faster, cooler dough ferments slower. I aim for my dough to be 76 to 78 degrees. If it's above 80 degrees, keep a close eye on your dough because bulk fermentation is going to be done really fast. If it's below 76 degrees, be patient. It'll take a little bit longer. Pro tip: you can control dough temperature by adjusting the water temp when you mix. Warmer water makes warmer dough, and cooler water will make colder dough. And lesson number 6, shaping is more important than you think. Shaping gives structure, and structure gives you oven spring. Oven spring is just the baking term for when the loaf springs up during the bake, which is what we want because we want a nice tall loaf, not a flat one. Shape your dough tight enough to hold its form, but not so tight that you deflate it. If you don't shape tightly enough, your loaf will spread and be flat. If you shape too tightly, you'll push out all the gas that's developed during bulk fermentation. And whatever you do, don't tear the surface of your dough when shaping. It's possible to overdo it, and tearing the surface of the dough is a sure way to get a flat loaf. When it comes to shaping, practice makes perfect. Focus on building tension without squishing all of those hard-earned fermentation bubbles. Lesson number 7, do not skip the Autolyse. Now the Autolyse is when we mix just flour and water, no salt and no starter. And then we let it rest for 30 minutes before we add our starter and our salt. This step hydrates the flour and starts gluten development, which makes your dough way easier to handle. Are you confused with the difference between an Autolyse and a fermentolyse? A fermentolyse is when you mix the flour, water, and starter, but not the salt. Fermentolyse and Autolyse are not the same thing. Autolyse is easy and makes a big difference, especially for beginners. Mix the flour and water, let it sit, then add the starter and salt, and move on. This simple step increases elasticity and extensibility in your dough, sort of like a rubber band. We want it to stretch out and then snap back. This is a little thing that makes a big difference. Lesson number 8, after baking thousands of loaves, 450 degrees is the perfect baking temperature for sourdough in a Dutch oven. I've tried 500 degrees and higher, and it just scorches the crust and the bottom. The crust sets too quickly and you lose oven spring, meaning the loaf doesn't bake up as tall. Here's my method. I preheat my oven with the Dutch oven inside at 450 degrees for about 45 minutes. I bake for 20 minutes with the lid on, and then I bake for 20 minutes with the lid off. And I pull the loaf when the internal temperature is between 205 and 210 degrees Fahrenheit. This method gives me beautiful and consistent loaves with no burnt bottoms. And lesson number 9, you're not in a sourdough art competition. As a beginner, don't overthink scoring. I remember watching videos on social media of these beautiful, intricate scoring designs with flowers and crazy patterns. Beautiful? Yes. Practical? No. All you need is one confident expansion score from the top to bottom of the surface of the loaf. This lets steam escape and controls how your bread opens up as it bakes. That's it. Skip the wheat stalks and flower designs until later. To be honest, I think there's nothing better than a loaf with a great ear and a big belly. One clean, deep cut with a sharp blade will give you a great oven spring and a beautiful ear. Done. And the last lesson, who you take sourdough advice from matters. There's so much sourdough info out there, and a lot of it is either too advanced, too scientific, or just plain unhelpful. You need advice that works for real life. You're baking in your home kitchen on a Tuesday, in between laundry, making dinner, and trying to take care of your family. It doesn't need to be so hard, and you shouldn't need $500 worth of fancy tools to make a loaf of bread. So here's the deal. Find one mentor you trust who consistently bakes beautiful bread and explains it in a way that makes sense to you. Stick with their method and block out the rest of the noise. I know that's hard to do. Once you're making solid loaves, you can experiment and find what works best for you. But until then, keep it simple and follow one method. Now that you know the basics of sourdough, you need to put all the puzzle pieces together. And that's why I created a step-by-step beginner's guide to make perfect sourdough every time. So watch this video next, where I show you how to make sourdough so good, people won't believe you made it.